on finance, which is a very vital area in our lives, God, very pivotal. Father, I pray that every speaker who will be presenting this afternoon will do so with dexterity and clarity of mind, and that we, O God, the recipients, will have an understanding of what you are saying to us in this period, in this season, and this time. Father, I pray for all the participants who are also with us, Lord, that you will touch them, God, and that they'll be receptants. They'll be able to understand what is being said and be able to ask their question in whatever form, in whatever way, God. No question is foolish. And Lord, they'll be brave so to do it as well, and they will get the answers that are so desired for a time and a season like this. Father, I bless every heart, every person, every presenter. In Jesus' name we pray in thanksgiving that everything would be well. In Jesus' name we pray in thanksgiving. All saints of God says, amen and amen and amen. So I'll hand you right over to Brother Noble, who will be introducing and the speakers who will be sharing with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. What I'm going to do is to set the tone for the evening. And what you see on your screen is going to be what we want to remind you of. We want to remind you that the goal for a Christian is not about acquiring all the wealth you can, but it's found in Ecclesiastes. And there are just 3 verses I want to read, which is, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. So the point we're making is that there's a need for contentment in our lives. And that contentment comes from God. So today, when we are talking about money, we're not talking about it from the perspective that we want to be able to acquire everything under the sky for ourselves, but we want to be able to be happy, to do good while we live. So that's the essence of what we're trying to do. This evening, we have a panel of 3 persons, and each person is going to present for you individually 20 minutes. At the end of that, we would open for a question time. And what I want you to look at before we even start is that at the base of your screen, you would see something called chat. If you could find it now. And if you find chat, there's a little bubble. And basically what you do there is type on that bubble, and we would see the questions you have. We already have about 10 questions that people sent before the meeting started, but you can in fact continue to send the questions, and what we will do is try to answer them. We've given ourselves a significant amount of time, nearly an hour of our time, to answer these questions, and therefore we believe that you'll be able to help yourself in this situation. To open this session this evening, the first person we have coming up is Kevin Finch. Kevin is an economist employed with the central bank in charge of the macroeconomic research part of the bank, which means that what he does is try to understand and try to monitor what is happening to the economy. And we felt that what Kevin will do for us this evening is be able to explain to us, given the COVID, what we can expect. He is going to try to do it in a simple way so that you don't have to have an economics degree to understand it. And you're going to be able to see what he's talking about, and then he will come back later on in case you don't have it very clear. in the question time and try and clear up any more things that you may have. So over to Kevin.
Thank you very much, Noble. First, let me start off by thanking Laventille Open Bible for the invitation this afternoon. I think it's a very important conversation that we need to have at this point in time. The usual disclaimers, the views that I represent are my own and not necessarily those of the central bank. So before we go into discussing what are the economic implications for Trinidad and Tobago, we need to set the international context. Right? So when COVID-19 was declared a pandemic early on in 2020, the expectation was that the virus would last only for a couple of months, perhaps for the first half of 2020, and life would go back to usual in the second half of the year. And this was borne out in the projections by international agencies. So if you look at the chart on the left-hand side, you would see in April of this year, the IMF projected that world output would have declined by just about 3%. And then there would be a sharp recovery in 2021 to around close to 6%. But as we all know, COVID-19 had different ideas, and it's been here longer than anyone anticipated. So in June of this year, the IMF revised their projections downward, and global economic growth is now projected to fall by 4.9%. And to put this 4.9% in perspective, it is the sharpest fall in world output we have experienced since the Great Depression, which was in the 1930s. I know most of us would not have been around in the 1930s. The closest we have to remember is perhaps the 2007-2008 global financial crisis. And still, the reduction was not as sharp. So there's a very deep reduction in world output that we're experiencing as a result of COVID-19. I want to pull out what's happening to some of the developed countries, particularly the United States, the United Kingdom, and Europe. The projections for these countries suggest that growth would fall anywhere between 8% and 10%. Now, why is that important for us in Trinidad and Tobago? These economies are major sources of foreign direct investment, and that is, in essence, foreign currency inflows into Trinidad and Tobago. Traditionally, this has been within the energy sector, but even before COVID, we have seen that those foreign direct investment flows have been falling. And now, with these source markets heavily affected, it's likely that the FDI is going to continue to fall. These countries are also sources of remittances. I'm sure that all of us have family living in the US or States or Canada or wherever, and they send back money from time to time. And that's an important part for maintaining the standard of living of households here in Trinidad and Tobago. We all see what's happening in the States, for example. A lot of people, millions of people unemployed. If they are now unable to send those funds back home, it will directly impact the standard of living of households in Trinidad and Tobago. And finally, the US, UK, Europe, and so forth are really the home of some of the major financial markets in the world. And we know that our national savings in the form of our foreign reserves, our Heritage and Stabilization Fund, are invested in some of these international financial markets. So when there's upheaval in these markets, obviously the value of our funds are affected. So in the earlier part of this year, our HSF would have lost close to 600 million. Now, thankfully, things have settled down a bit and we have recovered many of those losses. So with this international pandemic, I'm sure you've heard the term flattening the curve. But flattening the curve in terms of controlling the number of cases actually deepens the economic fallout the longer that containment measures are in place. So what that required, if we looked at nearly all the countries in the world, they have taken decisive action and implemented extraordinary policy measures, both on the fiscal side and on the monetary side. So this chart just shows you what has happened to interest rates in some of the major economies in the world. And you would see from the second quarter of 2020 that interest rates basically fell off a cliff, that they are actually close to zero, or in some cases under zero. So people are actually paying you money in some cases to take loans. And this is significant. The information we have thus far suggests that these extraordinary actions have settled things a bit, but as we know, COVID-19 is still unraveling and it will cause some effect for yet some time to come. Let's bring things closer to home now. What is the impact on Trinidad and Tobago? COVID-19 presents what I would call a dual shock to Trinidad and Tobago from both the medical side and the economic side. The poor and the vulnerable are likely to be disproportionately affected. The unsavory challenge facing policymakers is how to mitigate the trade-off between saving lives and causing irreparable damage to livelihoods. The imposition of strict containment measures to flatten the pandemic curve, as I said before, invariably causes deep contractions on the economic side. So let's look at what's happening with Trinidad and Tobago. Although we do not have official data as yet, we know without a shadow of a doubt that economic activity will fall this year. If we look at the energy sector, early on, due to a fall in global demand, for example, people are not traveling as much, so you do have a lower demand for transportation fuel. Just that general lack of activity has reduced energy demand worldwide. At the same time, as if things were not bad enough, we had a perfect storm. We had an oil price war develop between OPEC and Russia. And this really was ignited by the breakdown of negotiations to come to some agreement for production cuts with oil. So what happened as a result of that? The market was flooded with a lot of crude oil, prices plummeted, and we saw that even in around April or so, prices actually reached negative territory. That's the first time we've actually seen that. So even in Trinidad and Tobago, because prices were so low, we actually stopped exporting crude oil for some time and chose instead to store the crude oil. So of course, we were not making money during that period. The other area that would be affected is the non-energy sector. And this is really due to the stay-at-home measures that were in force. And this would have affected mainly the services sectors where you have your restaurants, entertainment, and so forth, and also the manufacturing sectors. So initially, when the IMF put out the first set of projections in April, our economic growth was projected to fall by 4.5% for 2020. We don't have updated forecasts, but what we have seen based on some of the other forecasts they have released in June this year, that our economic activity is likely to fall by double that amount. So it's really going to take a toll on the economy this year. Now, COVID-19 affects what I would say 3 agents in the economy. You have households on one side, you have businesses on the other, and of course you have government in the middle. So let's look at how it affects households. The obvious channel through which it affects households is through employment losses. We have all heard that a number of people have lost their jobs. They have faced either reduced working hours, reduced income, or some other form of disruption to their employment. Now, households also affect, what's happening to households also affect the financial sector, right? The financial sector is affected as households will eventually face debt servicing challenges. And this is notwithstanding the early intervention measures such as loan deferrals and interest rate reductions. So if you look at this chart I have here on the right-hand side, this just goes to show you how credit in the financial sector has been trending over a period of time. And we've seen that it has been pretty much healthy, increasing by around 5% on average. Now, a large part of that is really due to consumer debt, which is your red line. You see that it's trending above the total, which is the blue line. So there's been a lot of consumer debt driving or debt figures in Trinidad and Tobago, or credit figures from the banking system. And this is borne out if we look at our household debt numbers. We have high and rising household debt, averaging around 36% of GDP. So as consumers face increasing strain for debt service, this could directly affect the financial sector in the form of non-performing loans. So rising non-performing loans can actually precipitate a reduction in the supply of loans as financial institutions become wary of exposing themselves to what we would call at-risk borrowers. So this reduction in credit supply reinforces the economic decline as households are unable to source sufficient credit for investment and consumption purposes. What we've been seeing in the last couple of months or so is that a lot of the loans on the consumer side have been for refinancing and debt consolidation. So this would suggest that already, even before COVID-19, that households were under some pressure in terms of their financial status. Moving on to businesses, as we discussed earlier, the main channel will really be through the labor market. If businesses are not making money, obviously they will lower their demand for labor. And we are seeing that by some of the indicators we monitor. One is the number of job advertisements in the newspapers. We see that those numbers have declined. And also, according to the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, during the first half of this year, the number of retrenchments is around 50% higher than they were for the same period a year ago. Now, firms will also have outstanding debt, and they, without any revenue coming in, could also face debt servicing obligations. And to stay afloat, many of them will have to borrow in order to provide liquidity. Now, this has a finite life. You could only borrow so much. And if things do not recover soon, many will be forced to close. I think we can all agree that if you walk into some of the malls, if you walk around Port of Spain, you would see that there are many stores that were previously there that are no longer in operation. So it's happening before our eyes, the rise in business closures. Now let's move to the government. The government has had to step in, and that intervention has taken the form of expanding the social safety net. So we have all heard about the salary relief grants, loan guarantees to small businesses, tax refunds, and so forth. All of that is coming at the cost of approximately $1 billion in the first instance. Now, we have to place that $1 billion in the context that the government revenues were already impacted by the decline in the energy sector, as I explained earlier on. And that amount was estimated at about $9.2 billion for fiscal year 2020. So we have a situation where the fiscal deficit now has expanded from what they initially budgeted of $5.3 billion, meaning that the government will be spending $5.3 billion more than they receive in revenue, to now that figure has ballooned to about $15 billion. Now, something has to close that gap, and we have to get the money from somewhere. And most of the time, that will come from borrowing. So we have been borrowing money, both domestically, mainly from commercial banks, and from external sources, from multilateral agencies such as the Development Bank of Latin America. And also recently, you may have heard that we secured a US $20 million loan from the World Bank. And all that is also happening alongside withdrawals from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund in order to fill the financing gap. So what is the result? The result of all of this is really a rise in public debt above some of the thresholds that we have established, which was around 70% of GDP. More than likely, we will be breaching those thresholds. More importantly, however, an increase in debt is going to lead to a rise in debt servicing costs. So the more money you have to spend to service debt, the less funds we have to invest in what we call growth enhancing expenditure, capital expenditure, expending things on infrastructure, and so forth, things that would create jobs and lead to more growth. Okay. So what have been some of the challenges? and also what are some of the prospects post-COVID-19. As I discussed earlier, business continuity will be a challenge. Business models that we've become accustomed to will change, particularly in the service industries. People will become more wary about going into stores. So foot traffic will reduce. So a lot will depend on how businesses adapt to this new time that we are in. So business continuity, we have to keep monitoring that to see how many businesses will survive coming out of COVID-19. And related to that, employment opportunities will be uncertain. Because as we said earlier, if business survival does not, if businesses do not survive, obviously it will have a knock-on effect to employment in some of these companies. So I would advise that now is not the time to go deeper into debt, right? The only positive thing that we're seeing coming out is that because demand has been so low, we're likely to see inflation remain very low and contain below 1%. Right now, it's about 0.4%. I know that people say this is not what they experience when they go to the groceries, but the measure of inflation is really a general increase in the price of goods or a basket of goods. And generally what we're seeing is that price increases have been contained for the most part since last year and moving into this year. As a country, our foreign exchange earning capacity may also be constrained because our major markets which we export to, CARICOM and the United States, they are also suffering and they may experience suppressed demand from these markets. And finally, government will have to continue shouldering the brunt of recovery efforts, all in the context of a revenue-constrained environment at the cost of higher debt, which I explained earlier. So, because this is Laventille Open Bible, I put in this piece here in terms of what should be Laventille's response to the new normal. I think there are opportunities to reset and reshape Laventille at the same time that the national economy is being reconfigured. And what do I mean by this? First off, I think you need to ask yourself as a community some broad questions. One is, what can Laventille offer that no other community in Trinidad and Tobago can offer? Another way of saying that is, what is Laventille's comparative advantage in this post-COVID-19 dispensation? And what I want to put forward to you is this. We have all heard the term PPE in light of COVID-19. So I want to put to you, what is God's PPE for an uncertain economy? The first P stands for prayer, because you know the word says we need to pray without ceasing. The second one is the plan. And there's a reason that planning comes after prayer, because we know, again, the word says that many are the plans of a man's heart, but in the end, it is only God that establishes them. And finally, we need to execute, because faith without works is dead. We need to go out there and put our shoulder to the wheel. So this is my version of PPE for the post-COVID economy. And more specifically, in terms of some practical pointers, what should we do in this new economy? For those that may have been affected by job loss, this may be the time to retool and retrain or activate some of those talents that you have hidden, because for sure, we know that new jobs will emerge in this new normal. We need to embrace entrepreneurship for new services that will be required coming out of COVID-19. So now, again, as I mentioned, a lot of people will be skeptical about going into stores. We have seen now that a lot of businesses focusing on delivery have started to mushroom. This may be an area to go into. Also, in the education system, we know that moving forward, things are uncertain. There's discussion about blended school, one day on, one day off, and so forth. So that will create a market now for child supervision, child transport, and so forth. So there will be opportunities coming out of COVID-19. We just have to look and see where are those niches and how we can provide the services required. This point is going to be somewhat controversial because there's some that think it is the government's duty and responsibility to ensure the well-being of citizens. And to some extent that is true, but everything is within limits. My personal view is that we have abdicated the role for self-governance in the sense that we rely heavily on the government. So going forward, I think we need to reduce our reliance on the government for transfers and take personal responsibility for the security of yourself and your family. And this could start in very small and tangible ways. So for example, there's been this trust to start growing your own food. You don't need a lot of space, but you can plant your own food as conditions will permit. And finally, don't be afraid to fail. We know oftentimes people don't launch out into new things because they're paralyzed by fear. Now is not a time to be afraid or paralyzed. We need to execute, as I mentioned before. What we need to do is learn from our failure, because learning from our failure builds resilience. And with that, I would like to close, and I am available for questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Noble.
Okay. So thank you very much, Kevin. We've off to a good start, I believe, in that you have set the foundation for what we need to do. We are advising you that we are going to have the question time after all three persons have presented. So we're going to move quickly into Munilal Lalchan. Munilal currently is the procurement regulator for Trinidad and Tobago, which is the post that was set up to look after how we buy goods and services for the country. However, before that, he was involved as a vice president of finance and administration with what is our largest gas supplier, which is Atlantic LNG. He's an accountant by training, and the reason we have Munilal on the panel today is for him to be able to explain to us how we should work our situation as a family. So we're not talking the big national situation. We are talking about what's going to happen to us when we, as a family, face the situation that Kevin spoke about. So over to Munilal.
Thank you very much, Noble. And thank you very much, Kevin, for that enlightening session. Let me see. All right, get my presentation. All right, how do I do that? Minimize this and get that, yeah. All right, so this afternoon I'm going to be speaking for a short while on the family financial planning. And I would like to consider it to be a simple guide. So basically, when I go through the presentation today, you would see a number of things that I will be touching on. You already know. So some of it you can treat as a reminder, and some of it you can treat as new areas. So by way of introduction, in the Bible, you will see that Jesus spoke about money in 2/3 of his parables. Countries born and die because of money and wealth. Wars are fought on a regular basis over wealth, money, and finances, and so on. Paul admonished Timothy in terms of the love of money and being the root of all evil, not money itself, but the love for money. And over 700 scriptures are written about money and money-related activities. Suffice it to say, if I say that 80% of our time is either spent to make, to save, to spend, or to think about money and all related activities. So what are some of the principles of financial breathing? First of all, in Proverbs 3, 4, and 6, and I am going to share this presentation after, so that if you are taking notes, you don't need to take the detailed notes. So you need to acknowledge God's ownership daily. God is responsible and he owns everything. And I know Sister Kate would have just put up some things in the chat as to where the money gone. And well, the money ain't gone nowhere, but remember who is the source, and that's God. Accept God's direction. Sometimes when God speaks to us, we refuse to listen. And no matter, sometimes we pray and God is pointing us in a particular direction and we choose another direction to go because we believe that our guidance is better than what God is guiding us. Establish the tithe, very important, and I've seen that. I've been a Christian in Princeton Open Bible for over 56 years. I don't look that, but yeah. And I have always been a faithful tither, and God has blessed me tremendously through the tithing. So take that for what it's worth. Seek self-sacrifice. Many a times we are called upon to make sacrifices when hard times hit us, and we are accustomed living a particular way. And we don't want to change when God is saying, listen, hold on. It's time to make some sacrifices. Things are not all as it used to be. Additionally, what are some of the principles when you are making decisions in terms of a financial nature? First of all, Proverbs 28:22, avoid speculation. And some of the questions that came across to us in terms of some of these schemes, and I like to call them schemes because if you are not sure what you're getting into in terms of speculation, stay out of it. Because a lot of sweet talking people try to get you involved in all these fancy Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes and so on without you knowing. Sounds good, but I'll tell you that when you get hit real hard. So avoid speculation. Keep your finances current. Try and don't go into deep debt that you cannot recover from and you don't see the end of the tunnel, because sometimes you find yourself going down a road of no recovery. So keep your finance current. Consider your witness. Is it that you are hanging your hat where your hand can reach? Consider your witness to others, whether or not your means of income does not reflect how you spend your money and what you are acquiring as an individual. So consider your witness as a Christian. Give to the needs of others. And this is something that you need to practice. You may think that you're in a bad position, but sometimes there are others and other needy persons who might be even worse off than you are. So give to the needs of others. Avoid co-signing. And when I say co-signing, I use the word specifically, avoid. Not altogether, do not do it, but be sure who you co-signing. For example, if you are co-signing in terms of loan and guarantees and so on, make sure that you know who you are entering into bed with, because that could prove to be disastrous for the little that you have. Avoid indulgences. This is very important. You know, sometimes we really can't afford some things and we get into these indulgent practices in terms of purchasing things that we really don't need. You really don't need it, but because you see neighbors and friends and so on have it, you want to get involved in buying certain things. You want to constantly be eating outside when you know that it is more healthy and better for you to be eating at home and buying your groceries and your market and so on. Avoid those indulgences. And as Kevin would have said, in this COVID time, we have to prepare for decreases, and you are seeing it all around. If we are to believe some of the statistics that are being bandied about, over 60, 70,000 lost jobs in the country and so on. And some of you might be in that bracket. So prepare for decreases. And how do you prepare for decreases? In good times, remember in Joseph's days, in good times, the 7 years of good times, you need to put away for the 7 years of lean time. And that will help you when the decreases come, you will be prepared for it. And most of all, seek God's peace. In whatever you do, make sure you are peaceful with God in terms of all your practices. Some principles for home finances. What you have to do, and a good practice, is to make sure that you always have a written plan. Because sometimes when you don't write it down, you're not aware of what's taking place. And it is very important to have a written plan. And that plan could be in the form of a budget. provide for the Lord's work first, because he said that if you look after my business, I will look after your business. Excel at your task. So no matter what you are involved in, some of the most successful persons I've seen around is the doubles man, because they excel at what they do. The guys, Richards in Maracas, he excels in what he does, Bacon Shack. Some hairdressers, barbers, taxi drivers, maxi taxi drivers, accountants, lawyers, whatever you do, if you put your hand to it, make sure you give it your all and always excel at your task. If you are minister of the gospel, excel at that task, because I am absolutely sure if you are the best barber in town, people will find you. You don't have to set up your shop in a very well-lit place and so on. If you are the best barber, word gets around, there is a barber on the corner of the street, and that person real good, man. Limit credit. I didn't say stop credit, but sometimes we get involved in unnecessary credit. We tend to purchase things that we don't need, and we purchase it on credit. And before long, we find ourselves in a deep hole and cannot dig out of that hole. And the best way to get out of a hole is to stop digging. So don't continue along the lines of credit. Only get into credit for things that are long lasting and quick depreciable items, like you are a taxi driver, you need a vehicle, that's your tool for trade. You need to put aside for a house. If you try to save to put down a house right now, it might almost be impossible because of the value of money and so on. So you may have to get into a mortgage and so on, and I'll get to that shortly. So limit credit, don't avoid it, but limit it. Work within your means. Think before you buy. A lot of times, and it goes back to what I said before about impulse buying. Think. Don't just rush into buying any and everything. Think before you buy. Discuss it with your family. Discuss it. You'll be surprised that they could be very empathetic with you when you discuss things with them. Practice saving regularly. Even though the little you have, get into the habit of saving, and also encourage the family to save. The kids, when they're growing up, encourage them to save. Start a savings account for them at a very early age, so that when they reach at a certain age that they want to go into further education and so on, you will have the funds to put aside. And you'll be surprised. If you start saving very early in their life, very quickly it appreciates in value. And the type of savings and so on you get into, and the investment, our next speaker will guide you in terms of some of the things that you will do, dear Mr. Innes. Set your own goals with your family. Don't set your goals based on what you see next door or what you see on television. Set your own goals and set it with your family. Don't, as a father of the house or as a mother, a single parent and so on, don't sit aside and say that you set your goals and your targets and your budget and expect the family to follow if they don't have a clue what is in your plans and what is in your goals. And get out of that, back up to the top where I'm speaking about limiting credit. Try as much as possible over a specific period of time. If you are in debt, map out a process to get out of debt. Limit business involvement. Many of us get into business without really discussing it with persons who are in the know. If you have to get into business, talk to somebody who has the experience. Don't let sugarcoating come before you and get you involved in business activities that you don't have a clue what you're getting involved in, because you'll take your hard-earned money and really send it down the drain. So limit your business involvement only in terms of sure and good investment in terms of business involvement. I'm not saying don't get involved in it, but think before you act in terms of business involvement and who you got involved in business. And I want to reinforce, avoid indulgences. All right, so going into the family budget, why a family budget? A family budget is to help those who are not living within their means to do so. One of the reasons why you'll need a family budget. To help those with a potential surplus to fix your level of expenditure. So you have a surplus and you want to identify what that surplus is and use that surplus for investment purposes and so on. The budget will help you do that. It will help to establish a reasonable level of living for those who want to do so. So you could balance your budget. You know what you could afford, what you can't afford. And what is the purpose of a budget? It's really to define income versus expenditure in its simplest form. And it also helps you to detect problem areas. And when I come to an example of a budget, you'll see what I mean in terms of detecting problem areas. And it also aids, it gives you a written plan so that you can follow and refer to it over time during the year, using it as historical information and statistics to help you to plan for the future. And to follow up to make sure that you are, if you have a plan and you have relegated it into a budget, you will then be able to follow up and say, am I on track? Am I lapsing? Do I need to change anything as we go forward? Are there changing circumstances that now need to be reflected in my budget? So it's to help in follow up and to schedule money in and out of the home, income and expenditure. So what a budget will do, it will help you to visualize your goals, to provide a written point of reference for the family. So, and I say, and you'll see it later on, it should be in the open. You should have that budget open to every member of the family so that they know what is required of them to help in family communication. You'll be amazed in terms of, instead of finances coming between the family and breaking up the family, finances and open financial communication will help to build the family relationship and pull the team together, and to provide a written reminder of what you promise yourself that you will be doing. It also helps you to reflect your habits, because when you put down things in your budget, you amazingly, it will tell you, hey, do we really do these things? Are these things that you really should be doing? Is it good habits or bad habits? But what a budget will not do? What a budget will not do? It will not solve your immediate problems. You need to work on those. It would not make you use it. So you could have a very nice fancy budget like some companies have, excellent, well-written business plan, strategic plan, and all kind of thing, and they put it on the shelf and you never see it for 5 years until you want to review it. Don't let that be what you do with your budget. Make it a useful tool. So it would not make you use it. It would not take the place of action. Nice writing, but you need to act on what you promise that you will be doing. So using the budget, display it in the open. Let your family use it as a reference point. Update it. Set a goal that is achievable. Don't set things that will frustrate you. Set goals that are achievable, and you know you and the family could sit down and discuss it, review it, and achieve those goals. Always keep up to date with the budget to make sure that you constantly refer to it so that it will help you, and review it regularly. So just take a couple of seconds. We have about 5 minutes again for this presentation, but just take a couple of seconds to look at this. One of the first things that grabs your attention is the left-hand side, income per month. And you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Most of us just have one. The first one, salary. But if you have business and you're renting, you have interest coming in from investment, dividends from shares, and any other like tax refund, which is a one-off and so on. But amazingly, look at the right-hand side. So the left-hand side tells you those are the income you can get, but look at what you have on the right-hand side as opposed to what you have on the left-hand side. If you count it, you might get frustrated. Tithes, taxes, housing payments, lawn maintenance, taxes, food, groceries, milk, bread, sundries, car payment, gas, tune-up, maintenance, utilities, electricity, gas, water, telephone, other insurance, car, health, life, house, other loans for the house, car, hire purchase, credit card, other entertainment, clothing, savings, medical bill, dental, doctor, other schooling, travel, books, lessons, allowances. Now, when you see that alone, it will give you a big migraine. But this is the reality. There is only certain amount of income that you have. And you have all these expenditure that you have to take into consideration. So what you do, put down all your sources of income and then put down all the expenditure areas and see how you can pull back and balance your budget and make room for some investment so that in the times of need, the times of the famine, you will be able to pull on your investments. And once you fill out this table, it gives you a framework and a point to discuss with your family so that they can see what you could afford and what you can't afford. So this is a good model that you could use. It almost pulls everything together. And if you have any other things that I left out there, you can certainly add it to the list of income and expenditure, but it's supposed to be a comprehensive list. So think before you buy. Is it necessary? Does it reflect your Christian ethics? Is it the best buy? Is it an impulse item? And I put that in red for a reason. Does it add or detract from the family, or is it a highly depreciable item? Does it require costly upkeep? All things to consider. Impulse items, always delay if it's not a budgeted purchase. Allow only one new purchase at a time if it's not in your budget, if you have to. Never use credit card for impulse buying. Stay out of the store. Very important. Some of the things that you consider in housing: do not exceed 40% of the income in terms of mortgage. Do not finance a second mortgage for the down payment. Consider monthly upkeep of the house. If you are buying or investment in the house, consider if you have tax deduction in terms of your TD1s and so on. Shop around for insurance. Use a broker. They always help. And food. Some of the things you consider, about 15% of your budget. Too much or too little? Plan your menu first. Use a written list when shopping. Avoid buying when you're hungry. Use a calculator to make sure that you're buying within your budget. Reduce paper products, sundry items like shampoo and so on. Don't buy it in a grocery. Go somewhere else and buy it where you get it cheaper. Avoid processed and sugar-coated cereal. It's not good for your health in any event. Avoid prepared foods. Cook it at home. Look for advertised specials. Process your own baby food instead of all these things that you put in their mouth that probably not good for them in any case. And leave the kids at home. When you take them, you know what they do. They take up things and put it in the basket and you don't even know what they put there. And check every item by the cashier to make sure the cashier is cashing what you are buying. And clothing, make your own one. Purchase on sale. Mix and match, guys. Avoid brand names. We could do without it. Look at washing instructions, if you could wash at home and so on. Repair where possible. Is it necessity or is it extravagant? So that's my 20 minutes presentation, my friends. And I'm sure you'll have some questions, but as I said, it's practical and it's something that you could put into use as early as today. That's my 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Munilal. We appreciate your practical tips. And I like the idea of not going to the store if you're not going to buy it. Stay home. All right. So thank you very much. We are going to move now to talk about if you have saved some money, what do you do with the money you have saved? And for that reason, we want to be able to talk with Lloyd Ince. Lloyd Ince has his own business, advising people how to save and how to use their money. So you're not getting somebody who is doing this as a guessing game. This is how he makes his living. He gives you advice on how to spend your money, gives you advice on how to save your money. So I'm happy to have Lloyd with us. Welcome, Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Noble Philip. It's my pleasure to be with you. I'm trying to get my video on. Am I being heard and seen?
Yeah, your video is on and we're seeing you.
Yes.
So just to share your screen out.
To share my screen.
Right.
My shared screen button decided to disappear, not to be available, but I've just located it. And I'm sharing screen. Okay. I've sought to make my presentation very simple, but with a structure that should help you to deal with the subject of investment planning. The last speaker referred to the fact that we need to plan. When it comes to investing, there's a structure of planning that I will seek to recommend. The program is designed to empower participants to exercise a balanced and practical approach to investing. We have been operating since 1988, conscious that in the financial services marketplace, there's need for financial education. Most services or consulting within the financial services sector is provided by salesmen. As a salesman, you have to sell something, else you do not have a job. And that may sometimes put the customer at a disadvantage because you may not always have what they need, but you need to sell anyhow. And the customer may not be aware of what actually drives you in the form of a commission. And I wish to be very focused when it comes to financial planning, that the needs of a client are the paramount matter of significance. Whether the salesman makes a sale or not is secondary. So our mission is to provide an independent source of competent advice, information, and assistance to both corporate and individual clients with the purpose of helping them to clarify and achieve their defined objectives. The Consulting Interface Limited acts as an interface to translate the goals of its clients into manifested reality. Speaking of saving and investing, there's a major distinction between saving and investing. Savings can be referred to as postponed spending. That is, you have something to buy. You may not have all the money now to buy it. Therefore, you save towards it. You've got other options, probably hire purchase on your credit card, but they come at a cost. Savings is postponed spending. Then what is investing? Investing is putting money or resources to work with the sole objective of gaining a positive return. This is a distinction you need to see. Some people think that saving and investing are the same thing. They are not, and I hope you're making that distinction fairly clear. Investing is putting money or resources aside to work with the sole objective to gain a positive return. The return is the reward or the financial benefit that comes from investing. And this return or reward can come in two major categories. The first category is current income. The return may be in the form of income that is liquid, that you can spend now or you can use. Let's look at some examples of current income. This will include interest, which is credited to your account, whatever. Or it may be paid out to you in the form of a check, interest, or current income could be in the form of a dividend. That is a share of profits coming from an enterprise or from a share or a fund in which you participate. So you've got interest and you've got dividend. Then there is an investment in the form of land or property, which releases cash in the form of rent. So rent is another form of current income. Then you may have started a business. And while your business is developing, you either put yourself on salary or some form of draw. So a draw or salary can be a form of current income as you develop your business investment. Then there's another category of return called capital gains. This is when your investment does not release cash or dividend or rent or draw, but the investment itself increases in value. So where an investment may grow in value but not release cash, what you are actually enjoying is capital gains. To access your capital gains, you have to do one of two things. Either sell the entire investment, cash it in, or cash in part of the investment to release the value that the investment has inherently accumulated. Such investments could be shares or the purchase of land or some valuable item. So when you invest, you must be very clear what type of return you are looking for. Is it current income or is it capital gains? There's an important word that we hear when we consider investment. The word is called risk. And risk simply is the chance that the actual return from an investment may differ from its expected value. Let's imagine you put some money down on a deposit of some sort, and it is to pay to you in 2 years' time, $500. But during the 2 years, as the 2 years transpire, the price of goods increased in such a form that your $500 at the end of 2 years can only purchase $410 in items. Then you have suffered a risk while waiting for the return to come. Each type of risk that I'm going to describe has a specific name. And I would like you to, just in your mind, silently say to yourself, what type of risk does an investment experience if by the time you receive the return, the value of the money has depreciated? Well, you would likely think of inflation risk. And if that's what you thought of, you are correct. It's very important when considering risk that we define risk. And I will seek to introduce you to at least 3 types of risk that can help you to differentiate and to appreciate what risk really means. So let's shift to the concept of risk. Some concepts of risk. The first one is inflation risk. And let's look carefully at the wording to truly embrace the concept of the risk. Inflation risk. This is the chance that the return may not outperform inflation. In other words, you do not wish by the time the return gets to you that inflation has been greater than your percentage gain on your investment. So the first concept of risk is inflation risk. It is a chance, the chance that the return may not outperform inflation. Another concept of risk is liquidity risk. Liquidity risk, it is the chance of not liquidating the investment conveniently and at a reasonable price. If you bought land, for instance, it appreciated in value, but you wanted to liquidate your investment. It hardly ever is done conveniently, and there is a cost related to liquidating your investment. There's either a broker or salesperson. There are liquidation fees for canceling your mortgage. So there are, when an investment incurs some level of inconvenience in liquidating it and incurs costs, we refer to those costs as the liquidity risk. And another risk will be market risk. Market risk is the chance that the market price may fluctuate. So I would like you, beyond today, whenever you use the word risky in relation to an investment, ask yourself, what type of risk am I talking about? Because there's some risk, should you open yourself to those risks, they offset another type of risk. For instance, market risk can offset liquidity risk. In other words, sometimes the market risk allows you to sell an item even before the item is willing to or ready to release cash. In other words, the market provides you an opportunity to cash in because someone is willing to buy. If you did not make your investment available for purchase by another, you would have no market risk, but you also will not have an opportunity to cash in the investment conveniently. So a market, for instance, like the stock market, provides a liquidity opportunity when it comes to the purchase of shares. So let's just rehearse the three concepts of risk that we have touched on so far. Risk is always the chance, and it's the chance of a loss. So if the chance is that the investment may not outperform inflation, then your risk is inflation risk. The chance of not being able to liquidate your investment conveniently and at a reasonable price is called liquidity risk. And market risk is the chance that the market price may fluctuate. Keep these things in mind when you think of investing and in diversifying your investments. Let's touch for a short moment on investor profiles. There are some people, when it comes to investing, they are what you call risk avert. Once there's a possibility of any loss whatsoever, this person begins to get seizures. Emotional seizures, I hope. I'm just thinking of those, but not medical seizures. In other words, they become tense and they do not wish to have any possibility of loss whatsoever. Then there's some people who are risk takers. These are not people who are reckless, but because they have a little understanding or information about different types of investments, they are willing to take a chance or to mix their portfolio with some level of confidence. And then there are people who are in between the risk avert and the risk taker. They may lean more to being risk avert, or they may be leaning more to risk taker. But we're not speaking here of a risk tolerant person being a gambler. Gambling is not investing. Gambling is just taking chances. And some people refer to gambling as an illness. But a person may organize their investment portfolio in such a way that there's a certain percentage of their investment capital they may place into high risk type of investments, whether it is going into business, whether it is purchasing low price shares that have a good potential of appreciating. That will be the risk tolerant individual. But the risk tolerant individual is not gambling. The risk tolerant individual is mixing his portfolio, and where an investment may have a possible higher return, they're willing to take a chance with a certain percentage of their portfolio. Just briefly, let us look at the providers of investment tools or financial tools. You've got your banks, you have your credit unions, you've got finance houses, you've got the stock market, you'd have the central bank with bonds, you have corporate bonds, where a company brings out a bond in order to raise capital to finance a project. So they approach the public offering a bond. It may be for 3 years, maybe for 5 years, maybe for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And the bond will pay a certain level of interest and matures at the end of a specified period. So you've got mutual fund companies, often income and growth funds, money market funds. In the general financial services place, you've got what is called the primary market and the secondary market. Let me talk a bit about the primary market. The primary market is simply a situation when a financial instrument is first being launched. It may be the primary issue of shares from a company, or it may be the issuing of a bond. In the primary market, an announcement is made that a certain number of shares will become available in the marketplace from a certain date and will come at the price of a specified price. And the market will close at the end of a certain period. That situation is called the primary market. So initially the security, the bond, the shares are brought to the market. Applications are available, whether at banks or with the stockbroker, and applications are made, and then the shares or the bond market closes and the instrument is issued to members of the public. After the primary market closes, then there is a situation in which individuals who had bought from the primary market now wish to cash in on their bond or their shares. So they go to the bond market or the share market and offer their shares or their bond for sale. That is called the secondary market. In other words, it's purchasing an instrument secondhand after it had been initially purchased by someone else. There are many people who feel uncertain about operating in the primary market. They don't know when or if they should buy a share, or whether they should buy a bond or trade it. Then there's an intermediary, which I will refer to as mutual fund companies, which are willing to purchase or develop a portfolio of investments, either shares or bonds or stock. And they manage the portfolio and issue invitations for members of the public to buy units of ownership in their portfolio. The mutual fund company has its investment managers, and if they're developing a stock market portfolio, it may be called an income and growth fund, inviting members of the public to buy units of ownership in the portfolio. Therefore, the unit holders become the owners of the portfolio. And each quarter or each fiscal period in which returns are received from that portfolio, the returns are divided up and distributed to the unit holders in accordance to the number of units they hold. And that, in fact, is what a mutual fund company does. So those of you who will have units in the Income and Growth Fund for the Unit Trust Corporation, or you have units in the Money Market Fund in FCB, or any mutual fund company, what in fact you receive is a share of the profits made on the portfolio. The mutual fund investment managers are the ones who do all the investment chores. They select the individual stock and the different bonds that are going to be purchased. They balance the fund to maximize the possible return to be derived from the performance of the fund. And the unit owners or the unit holders of the mutual fund enjoy the benefits. Then you've got the real estate market. The real estate market is that market, that situation which you can scout or research or inquire about properties that are available for sale. You research the price, you make a bid, you negotiate, and eventually you may acquire a bit of real estate. So broadly, this is the scope of the investment opportunities that are available. Now, before investing, you should be in a certain position. Before you invest, you should be living within your means or living within your budget and enjoying a fair surplus. If you are not living within your means or living within a budget and enjoying a fair surplus, when you invest, you are marking time, or you may actually be wasting, you may actually find yourself wasting money. Because since you have to wait for the investment to bring in a return, you have to have the opportunity to allow time to pass, during which time you can support yourself. Since investing involves laying aside capital in order to generate income, one must ensure that he can support his lifestyle while he waits. There are many of us who start an investment and cash it in before the investment matures. You cash in because you have run out of money. So before you can invest, you must first be living within your means and enjoying a surplus. Let me explain this a little further. Before you invest, you should need to have money laid aside to meet your non-monthly expenses. Home maintenance, car maintenance. These are things you don't have every month, and some of us forget. We forget the annual car insurance policy and the home insurance policy. Sometimes we forget the school fees. So 3 months down the road, here comes the school fees, but you have not laid that money aside, but you went and invested in a government bond for 30 years. So off you run to the credit union to get money to see your child into next term's new class. So before you can invest, you must be able to live within your means. You should also have what is called an emergency fund. Let me give you an example of an emergency fund. An emergency fund is a sum of money that you have put aside somewhere that is accessible, that should the condenser on your fridge spoil one Friday afternoon, you can finance or purchase a new condenser without having to go to the bank for a loan. An emergency fund is somewhere that you will go and withdraw the money necessary to change your tire that blew out yesterday morning. We would recommend that from your budget, you try to estimate about 3 to 4 months of living expenses that you can put aside in an account that is easily accessible should you run into an emergency. One should also be able to identify the nearest risk-free investment as a benchmark before you decide to invest. In other words, you should have an idea of, if I'm investing, which is the first place I can put some of my money that pays a reasonable return. And I would like to take you through an exercise of identifying what is called your nearest risk-free investment. Once you have identified your nearest risk-free investment, you ask yourself the question, what level of return does that investment pay? And if that indeed is your nearest risk-free investment, then any other investment besides that one has a greater level of risk. And if it does have a greater level of risk, you wish to have a higher promised return that will entice you to put money into the next level of investment. Now, allow me to change my screen to take you through a little metrics. Are you seeing a new screen? Someone can put in the chat.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
Okay. So in this matrix, what we are doing is we are looking at common investments available. You have the investment instrument on the left. And we have 3 forms of risk: inflation risk, market risk, and liquidity risk. We have recognized from Mr. Finch this afternoon that inflation has been about 1%. As a matter of fact, the last 3 years, it seems to be just about 1% and a little under. So we're going to ask ourselves a number of questions concerning risk. The first question will be phrased somewhat like this. What's the chance of this investment, suppose we were selecting bank savings, not outperforming inflation? And our reply would be either the chance is low, we'll use an L, the chance is moderate, we'll use an N and M, or the chance is high. So that's our little key at the bottom. Low, L, moderate would be M, high would be H. We are seeing some of the lowest savings interest rates that we have ever seen in the last 50 to 60 years, at least within my lifetime. And I was born in 1955. That's quite a long time. I think the average savings rate is somewhere close to 0.5% or not much higher. Inflation is 1%. Here's a question in measuring inflation risk as it relates to bank savings. What is the chance of bank savings not outperforming inflation? Is the chance low? Is the chance moderate? Or is the chance high? What's the chance of bank savings not outperforming inflation? And I would assume that you will agree with me. And if you don't, you really don't have a choice. I'm just taking you through the matrix. So there's a high chance that bank savings will experience inflation risk, will not outperform inflation. What's the chance of a bank savings being affected by changes in market price? Well, bank savings, the interest rate is not affected by market price, so the chance is low. What's the chance of your not being able to liquidate a bank savings conveniently and at a reasonable price? The chance of not being able to liquidate a bank savings conveniently and at a reasonable price is low. So as far as this risk profile is concerned, bank savings has high inflation risk, low market risk, and low liquidity risk. Fixed deposits. Well, I think the best you might get on a fixed deposit around now is around 2%. So the question is, what's the chance of a fixed deposit not outperforming inflation? Well, I will put moderate to low. What's the chance of a fixed deposit value being affected by market price changes? Well, a fixed deposit is a fixed deposit. It's fixed. It doesn't fluctuate. So low. What's the chance of your being able to liquidate a fixed deposit conveniently and at a reasonable price? Well, this will be more moderate than low. Fixed deposit maybe 1 to 2 years. You have to wait to cash your fixed deposit in. You have to wait till the maturity date. Or if you choose to cash in before the maturity date, the fixed deposit will have a penalty on its liquidation. So as far as liquidity risk, we would say moderate. A bond. A bond, for purposes of our discussion today, we will consider it as a longer term fixed deposit. In reality, that's what it is in your hand. But according to the textbook, a bond is a a debt instrument. The person who is borrowing is the person who is offering the bond to you. But just for now, as a matter of concept, think of the bond as a long-term fixed deposit. Bonds are, on average, available at around 3%. Inflation is 1%. So what is the chance of a bond not outperforming inflation? The chance of it not outperforming inflation is low. Bond. What's the chance of the bond being affected by market price? Well, I'll put low, but I must qualify. There are some bonds that are traded in the marketplace, and depending upon the interest rate being offered on the bond, if it is higher than other opportunities for earning interest, the bond may have a price in the marketplace. But let's just look at a traditional non-tradable bond. Market price risk is low. Liquidity risk, I'll put it moderate to high. Money market funds pay around 1.5%. The chance of a money market fund not outperforming inflation, I'm going to put it as moderate. And I'm saying moderate because right now, the money market funds are paying 1.5%, inflation is at 1%. They're fairly close and it can fluctuate. The chance of a money market fund being affected by market price is low. And the chance of not being able to liquidate your money market fund, you just need to go in to the organization, fill out a form, sign a withdrawal, and you can get your money. So therefore the liquidity risk is low. The chance of a growth income fund not outperforming inflation, well, on average, growth and income funds, their return fluctuates, but I'm looking at the average over the last 3 to 5 years on money market fund, not money market fund, income and growth funds. They have been paying about 3%. So the growth and income funds have a low inflation risk. Growth and income funds are subject to market price fluctuations, as you recognize with your number one scheme of the unit trust. The price changes according to the realities on the stock market. So we would put they are subject to market price. And liquidity, well, you can cash in a mutual fund at the mutual fund organization. So we put the liquidity risk as low. Credit unions. Credit unions on average are paying between 3 and 4%. Some credit unions are paying higher interest return, dividend return than others. But in general, credit union shares seem to have a low inflation risk. Credit union shares are not subject to market risk because they're not publicly traded shares on the stock market. So we'd say the market risk is low. And you could have a bit of a liquidity risk with the credit union. The Credit Union Act allows the credit union, if necessary, to have a waiting period of up to 3 months before cashing in your shares. But most of them cash in your shares within 2 to 5 days. So we would say the liquidity risk is moderate. Real estate. Real estate over the long term normally will outperform inflation. I'll just put moderate because of the time needed for real estate to move in the right direction for you. It is highly affected by market price. As a matter of fact, the market price or the market risk is a plus for you. For mostly those of us who have experienced appreciation of real estate, it silently took place without our involvement. We just recognize that our house is now worth, whether it be $200,000 more than when we bought it 10 years ago, or it may even be more. The main thing with real estate is very highly illiquid. You normally have to advertise the property for a number of months. Then the person comes and walks around and tries to get to beat down your price. And it may be they may make a down payment and then they have to go for a mortgage, and it takes them 3 months before they come and pay you your money. So you can in no way sell real estate if you were hungry looking for a meal. It is so illiquid, you'll die before you get that money. So the liquidity risk is high. Now, if we were to look at the 6 illustrations of investments, which one of these is the nearest risk-free investment? It must at least have 2 L's. Or if it had 3 L's, it would be easy pickings. So we say somewhere around money market fund seems to be the nearest risk-free investment. Would you agree with me? If I can see some heads nodding, I will know that somebody concurs. Yes, somebody concurs. Thank you, Joanne Carrera. And so with a money market fund, what is the interest rate being paid? 1.2%. Then, unless an investment, your first port of call is your money market fund. You're not putting money anywhere unless it is paying at least 1.5%. And if you're going to put money in any of the other 6 investments, they must pay more than 1.5%. That's why you need to find out what is your nearest risk-free investment. It becomes your benchmark for making a decision about an alternative investment. Even your SUSU probably. You may put money in your SUSU just to develop the habit of putting money aside, but then you're not, unless you get in first, second, or third hand, your SUSU is not paying you any interest. So you say, well, listen, let me put my money aside in my money market account, and at least I can get 1.5%. So the whole purpose of this exercise we just did is, before you invest, find out where is the nearest risk-free investment that you can use and put your money. And then from there, begin to make decisions on other investments, which would most likely have a higher rate of risk. But the only thing that entices you to put money in the other investment is because it pays more than 1.5%. So let me turn back to my PowerPoint.
So Lloyd, we need to wrap up.
Yes. We just did that matrix. As time goes by, if interest rates go down, the money supply increases. That means there's an easier method to access money from your banks. And if money supply increases in the hands of people, retail prices tend to go up because people are going out into the marketplace, buying goods and services, and the prices go up. And the similar thing happens within the stock market. As you get older, moving from your early career to your mid-career to your peak accumulation period, as you get older, basically what you seek to do is to reduce your holdings in high-risk investments and put most of your investing or more of your investing in the safer areas. and I'm bringing you into a close relating to this. Our national inflation over the last couple of years, from 2001 to 2019, shows that inflation has had an upward curve, and the critical area of price increase has been in the area of food. The other items of clothing, transportation, and housing has been much more moderate. And the final slide looks at the stock market in relation to inflation. Inflation is the blue curve, or the blue pillars seen at the bottom, and the stock market is the red pillars or red bars seen above. You recognize that the main issue with these red bars is that they fluctuate. From 1992 right to 2019, the stock market, though fluctuating, has outperformed inflation by significant amounts. And I wish you to see this, to have an appreciation for why people utilize the stock market investing in order to keep pace with values over time. And I will stop here and hand back the mic to Noble Philip.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lloyd. Okay, we're a little over time in terms of our presentations, but we want to move straight into the issue of questions. And we have a question that was present from those who submitted, basically saying that there are some digital marketing companies such as eToro and I Am Mastery Academy, which are gaining popularity with large memberships. And it's attracting the youths. And it appears to operate principally on network marketing principles. Trading opportunities such as Forex, buying and selling digital currencies exist within these platforms. How legitimate are such online companies? How relevant are they now? Should we get involved in these companies? What are the dangers of Forex trading? And how genuine or real are the gains or profits of Forex? That's our first question.
Good evening again. I could probably answer from the regulatory point of view. Last year, we noticed that there are a number of entities that are expressing interest in what we call the financial technology or fintech sphere. A number of players. And because of that, the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission, along with the central bank, issued a notice to the public last year, warning people to be careful in terms of how they engage with some of these entities, because one, they are not regulated. Two, if you put your money in and you lose your money, there's no recourse, right? They're encouraging people also to read the prospectus of these companies and any financial product that they may be offering, because of course, you know, they say the devil is always in the details. So at this point in time, I could say that some of these entities are not registered or regulated in any particular way. So I would urge and encourage caution when dealing with such entities, especially in these times when you're looking for somewhere to place your hard-earned money. So that's just a general response from the regulatory point of view. I don't know if others could answer specifically where the Forex trading is concerned.
Lloyd Murinala.
Yeah, Noble, Kevin hit the nail on the head. And I would recommend, I don't get involved in it. If my kids come to me, I tell them stay far away from it. It's something I do not understand. And if you don't understand the principles under which this thing operates, there is never a free lunch. Stay away from it if you don't understand it. Seek counsels of persons like Kevin and so on who are in the industry in terms of how it operates and so on. But I personally, I do not get involved. I stay as far as possible from it.
Mhm.
That is good advice. Sometimes you get the impression that those who market it themselves do not understand. The movement of foreign currencies and value depends upon world trade. It depends upon the domestic inflation rate and interest rate within the country, the balance of payment. A lot of things affect the value or exchange put on a currency. I've seen people who are marketing for Forex and they don't seem to know very much about world trade and the movement of currencies. And for that, I'm very, very cautious.
But people say that people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and other big names are involved in Bitcoin. So if they are doing it, then why don't we do it?
Yeah, and recently, Noble, you would have seen about 2 years ago, South Korea actually banned the whole trading of Bitcoins and so on. There's a reason why they probably did it. And again, the whole issue of how Bitcoins work with blockchain technology and so on is new areas, and that the whole issue of blockchain and Bitcoins and so on is not going to mature at least for the next 10 years, according to some of the commentators. So yeah, Bill Gates could afford to get involved in that. He has enough money to get out and not make a big loss and so. And a lot of people internationally are trading with Bitcoins and so on. Again, if you don't understand it and you can't get proper advice, stay on the side of caution.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about investments. And we have investments, and Lloyd talks about risk. And we have stocks and bonds, government bonds, and credit unions and whatnot. If you are a young person, or if you're a person with a family, how do you decide what is your best investment plan?
Like in my presentation, I gave some fundamentals. Your best investment plan is determined by where are you at this point in time. The fact that you live within your means, that you have an emergency fund, that you have allocations for non-monthly expenses. That means you're on an even keel, so you can begin to consider investing. Investing needs to be maintained and not interrupted in an unplanned way, because what is called a fire sale or a forced sale normally causes you to break your investment at a cost. And sometimes that cost may even be a lost opportunity. For those of us who have been working for several years, we enjoy having maintained a pension fund plan for a number of years. But there were many temptations from time to time to cash that thing in when more pressing needs seem to have presented themselves. And good sense, and probably even the prodding of a spouse who knows that he or she would suffer the consequences of you retiring without certain level of financial security, may have knocked the good sense in your head to keep contributing to your pension. So that what should you invest in and where is dependent upon where you are at a certain point in time. There are some investments that we need to have. There's certain things we need to ensure that we have when we are fairly young, when our responsibilities are many years ahead. There are dependent children, there's spouse, there's a mortgage. though I would not refer to this as an investment, I could refer to it as a security. You need to have certain monies put into financial security if you die, if you became disabled, if you had a terminal illness. Insurance, adequate insurance coverage is very important to be in place before you begin to do serious investing.
So is a government bond a high risk situation or a low risk situation? Because you talked about the money market fund as being the low risk
The nearest
benchmark.
risk free.
Yeah. So is the government bonds the same thing or different?
Well, let me throw the question back at you. What type of risk are you talking about?
Well, you tell me.
Well,
If I am a person who is trying to put together a portfolio, what role would a government bond play in that?
well, the government bond will play the role of preserving your money for a number of years, guaranteeing a certain level of interest income for that number of years. So what it does also, it flattens the risk related to market risk, and it flattens the risk related to inflation risk, because that bond is paying you a fixed and steady form of income, unless the bond has what is called a call option, where like Brian Quietung did somewhere back 2 or so decades ago, where he cashed in he brought into maturity the high yielding government bonds that were available then and reintroduced new bonds, which is he exercised the call option so that the central bank did not have to pay that high level of interest that had been promised on some long-term bonds.
Okay.
So the risk that a bond creates is a liquidity risk, in that you have to wait the 20 years or the 30 years, but it does not have any market risk.
Okay.
Well, I could perhaps just jump in and say it all depends where you are in the cycle, because again, not all government bonds are equal. Credit rating is an important thing,
Yes.
which really looks at the underlying fundamentals of the sovereign itself.
Yeah.
So whereas a couple of years ago we were rated, it's A-rated. Now we are, according to S&P and Moody's, around BA1, which was on the cusp of investment grade. If you look at the pricing of bonds and on the yields, they reflect that additional risk premium. So it all depends on where you are and what are the underlying fundamentals of the government bond that you're thinking of investing in.
Yeah.
So let me ask all three of you a question, because I think I heard both Munilal and I heard Lloyd, I think it was. Two of you said you shouldn't start to save money, shouldn't start to invest money unless you have a budget and you are saving some kind of saving. How do you reconcile that with the issue of people telling you you must save money every month? So if you save money every month, is that a bad thing? And what do you do with the money that you save in every month? And then the second part of that question is, given the uncertainty that Kevin spoke about, why should we save? Should we not just spend what we have one time?
Well, I think part of that question is rhetorical. Nonetheless, you cannot save unless you spend less than you earn. And that's where the budget comes in.
Okay.
So if a person says you must save every month, then that means you have to put yourself in a position to save every month and live on a budget. you cannot save if you're not living on a budget, because you just don't have the money to save. And you can't invest, because whatever you put aside, before it can grow, you need to cash it in to either meet some other urgent need or some deficit that has cropped up because you're not living within your means.
The other thing I would add to what Lloyd would have said is that when you look at your budget and the income and expenditure side, in order to save, you have to either do one or two things. When you look at your budget, you map it out and so on. You'd either have to increase your income by supplementing it with some extra type of business to get involved in, whether or not you grow your own food and save some of those money that you would normally spend. You either increase your income or you cut your expenditure if you want to really save. And again, is what you're saving for. One of the things I found very useful when I was in my early employment is entering into the credit union. I had a goal in mind as to after 5 years, what I want to achieve, after 10 years, what I want to achieve. And as your shares mature in the credit union, you are allowed to access more and more credit facilities, like 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times your shares, and at preferential interest rates, and also legal fees and so on. A lot of that is not required as required under the banking system. So I would say, once you map your budget, look at your income side, your expenditure side, and then you either increase your income or drop your expenditure if you really want to save, but it is not impossible to do.
So you are suggesting that people join credit unions in preference to banks?
My personal preference, and I could speak based on my experience, I find it most useful to be a member of a solid credit union, but it must be one of the reputable ones. Make sure you look at their financial statements to understand how they have been doing and so on, and get somebody to interpret it for you if you do not, or you cannot do it yourself. But personally, I find it was very useful for me.
Okay.
On the topic about should we just spend all we make now because conditions are uncertain. Everything is a cycle, and everything has seasons. I mean, the word says, you know, there's a time and season, right? Mm-hmm. But also, it also says a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So we're not here to live for ourselves. I mean, yes, time may be uncertain now, but it's not going to be that way forever. And we have a responsibility, especially men as head of households, to cater for your family needs. So I would guard against that mentality of spending everything we have now because we're not sure what the future may hold. We still have a responsibility to those that are under our care.
Okay. A small question just for clarification. And I'm asking it because I'm not sure if I saw it on either Munela's zone or Lloyd's zone. What is that annuity? Is that annuity a saving or investment?
Well, I would call it a savings. You're saving towards a cash flow at the point of your retirement. And you're also putting money that you would have normally said goodbye to forever, which is your tax dollars. 25% of that is going towards your future security. It is invested. And unless we just are playing on words, it generates an income. So, but it's really putting aside for a future need. And you're putting it aside in the most economical fashion, utilizing tax dollars that you would have normally spent.
What do you mean by using tax dollars?
Well, because you get a refund of the taxes paid. From the money utilized as a contribution. Yeah. Your contribution becomes tax-free because you put it into an annuity. So that 25% refund is a type of return.
Mm-hmm.
Again, here's just a concept. You're looking at the fact that this is bringing in 25% more than the annuity inside build-up
Mm-hmm.
is being supplemented or enhanced by the tax refund. And to truly use that, you need to plow the tax refund into the annuity contribution.
Okay. So what you're saying is two things. One, when we buy an annuity, make sure and file taxes so as to
Yes,
get the benefit of the 25%.
that's right.
And then secondly, you're saying take the 25% that we get,
Yeah.
don't spend it, but put it back in the annuity.
Yes, I'm saying that definitely.
Okay. Munila, you were saying something?
And just one caution, make sure the annuity is approved, because there are some annuity that recently that we found was not approved, and it would not get, therefore, the benefit of the tax allowance associated with. So make sure that it's properly stamped and so on and approved by the Board of Inland Revenue.
All right. And how do you know that?
The insurance company and agent will advise you accordingly. I know there are new products that are being developed, and they tell you that upfront is not allowable for the tax deduction, but you will get, and you can make your own inquiries too, but the agents normally tell you that it is approved by the Board of Inland Revenue, and you'll get it stamped, and you'll get a copy with the stamp on it that says it's approved.
Okay.
Yes.
So
and at the end of the year, they give you a statement that you could use to attach to your income tax return that gives you the benefit of the tax deductibility.
And it shows you,
sorry?
Sorry, and it also shows you the Board of Inland Revenue stamped approval. Right. Yeah.
Good. Are there other such chances we have to be able to save on our taxes by doing things?
You have like the first-time homeowners also, they are allowed to deduct the payments of the interest on the mortgage loans and so on. So that is allowable also. So you can get those, and that's a benefit also for new homeowners. So that's one of the things. Venture capital and so on is another area, but you must have the money to get into venture capital and all these different things. But housing, annuities are two sure areas that you could benefit from.
Okay. What about somebody told me that you can get a deed of covenant for your church giving?
Absolutely, and that is still allowable deed of covenants, and a lot of people question whether or not it's ethical to claim your taxes. And I've had several of these seminars with church members, and they say, well, that is not ethical because I've given to the Lord, I shouldn't claim it back from the tax. But if the government has allowed you the opportunity to get a stamp deed of covenant and recover and reduce your taxes, if you think is unethical, then all you need to do is when you get your tax return, pay that into the church too. But again, Noble, I think that's an excellent point. If you are giving your tithes, get your deed of covenant and claim it back.
There's also,
go ahead.
Sorry, just added to the tax advantage ways of savings. If you're at a certain level of income and your organization is willing to contribute to a Section 134(6) annuity program for you, you can have as much as 20% of your gross income placed into an annuity program owned by your company, and that money is placed there before tax. So at retirement, you have a very enhanced retirement package from your organization.
So let me understand what you're telling me then. You're saying that some companies will allow you to take your income before taxes and pay it into an annuity approved by the Board of Inland Revenue.
Yeah, there's certain requirements. In addition to the ordinary contribution to pension and other personal annuities you may have.
Yeah, I think also
more than 20%
right.
of your gross income is the maximum that can be put into such a plan.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because some companies, they try to avoid them using it as trying to evade the taxes by putting an abnormally large amount in these types of plan and reducing the basic salary.
Yeah, but the plan is approved by the Board of Inland Revenue, and certain details have to be given before the approval can be done. And if you're in any particular year, your total contributions to retirement programs exceeds 20% of your gross income, the allowance is disallowed and totally taxed.
Okay. So I want to come back to the scenario we are living with, which is that we have uncertainty. You are saying so that's what Kevin said, is uncertainty. You are saying that in uncertainty, certain properties are going to be illiquid and you can get a better price because you can't sell it. Someone else asking whether we could decide to go and acquire properties now because people being afraid, and I could go and buy a property at a lower price than I could buy other times, and maybe it is a better thing for me to do it now. How would you guys respond?
I would say the market dynamics should really determine whether or not you are really truly getting a good deal. One of the things about real estate, land and building, it tends probably not to depreciate. The issue in Trinidad we have is that as fast as these high-rise apartments go up, we don't know where the money is coming from, but they all seems to be selling at some very abnormally high prices. So I'm not so sure about the price of everything seems to be remaining stable or relatively stable, but the markets for housing, real estate, land and building seems to continue to rise. I'm not really seeing it lower, and where you could benefit from is where persons cannot pay their mortgages and the banks are selling these properties and so on, and you might be able to acquire one that way.
I agree with what Moyal is saying, but the market is really a segmented one. You may find in the area where the majority of us could afford to purchase our property, there's really excess demand. So you find the prices already fluctuate as much, nor do they decline. You may find some declines in the upper end of the market, mainly because most people with those properties have them as second homes for investment. And if they really want to dispose of it, then they are prepared to take somewhat of a hit on the sale price. But generally, the segment where the middle class would be looking at it to purchase homes, there's already excess demand conditions. So the prospect of finding, deeply discounted property is very slim. I mean, you'll have to really look for your opportunities.
So let me ask a question. Where does the money disappear to? The money in the economy? How come we don't have money anymore?
If you look at, I think Lloyd mentioned the whole issue of the balance of payments, which is really the country's account of what it earns and what it spends with external parties. Trinidad and Tobago, we have a lot of leakages from imports. We import almost everything. And again, we need foreign exchange to pay for those imports. If our earning capacity is somehow compromised, again, because we have less receipts from the energy sector, yet still we are purchasing the same amount via imports, whether it be consumer imports, capital goods, we have to pay for fuel, right? The money goes out through that channel. So really, import leakage is one of the major ways where we find money moving out of the country.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Excuse me, I must step away for a moment.
Sure. Thank you. So the question that is being asked is if there is pending unemployment and I am working for just enough money to look after myself and my family, what should I be doing at this point in time?
Again, it comes back to the point that we would have raised earlier, Noble, that if you are barely getting on with what you are earning right now, I think survival is probably the name of the game. At the same time, you have to take the opportunity to make sure, I think Evan would have mentioned it, that you leave something for your kids, because believe it or not, the children grow up very, very fast. And if you don't provide for them in terms of their future education and so on, you'll be going through a vicious cycle where you're leaving them behind, where others would be going forward. So you have to take into consideration how quickly they grow up and how quickly they will be calling upon you for funds in terms of their future education and so on. So education is one of the ways that you can get out of poverty. So make sure you spend in the right areas. You may have to sacrifice, and that is one of the things I would have mentioned. You may have to sacrifice and make some personal sacrifices like our grandparents and parents would have done in the early days. They would have made personal sacrifice to ensure that we got a good education. So that is primarily important. Medical treatment and so on is another area that you need to be aware that you put aside something in case you have to undergo that or get involved in a good medical insurance plan, because you can never tell when those things will be needed. But other than that, those the sacrifices that you have to make will be important if you need to make sure that you put aside something for the rainy day.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly to that. Just as you do on a national scale, you may need to look at if you're in survival mode, you may really have to look at sale of assets. So for example, as a family, you may have 2 vehicles. You may decide, listen, we need to consolidate and have 1 vehicle and free up some cash through that sale.
And again, we need to look at our habits, because this thing about eating outside and simple things you can do that you have developed a taste and a habit over a number of years could cause you to reduce expenditure and make ends meet.
Okay. But you talked about the other side of it, where you talked about not only eating in, but you talked about other kinds of jobs that we probably could do with the COVID change. You talked about education, you talked about transport. Are there any other ideas you want to offer us in terms of how we could increase our income if we get unemployed?
And it comes back to what skills do you possess in terms of additional areas that you could benefit from. A number of individuals would have gone, and you'd have to start thinking about whether or not you probably need to be retrained and retooled to get into some of the areas. Right now, you would see one of the fastest growing industries in the world is online shopping. Because we have to stay at home, that has blossomed and boomed, and those shares are just hitting the roof. So what it is that this opportunity has brought for us in terms of the COVID-19, and this may be a way of life for into the distant future. So what are some of the things that you could do to retool, re-educate yourself, and get involved in to take advantage of some of the opportunities? Because opportunities lost on the one hand, it is something that somebody is benefiting from on the other hand.
Mhm. Kevin, you have anything to say to that?
I think Munila covered it.
All right, okay.
I think some other questions are coming up.
Yeah. Okay. But there's another question we had here in terms of people who had bad credit in the past, and they want to start restoring their credit, but this is where we are now in terms of the economy. How do they restore their credit? What can they do to restore their credit?
When you say credit, Noble,
Their personal credit.
For example, your credit rating with the bank?
Yes, yes. So they got into a bad patch. They got a damaged credit rating. They are working to try and restore that credit. Do you have any kind of hints to give them to fix that situation?
Not sure, because some of these banks are unforgiving. So it takes a long while before you could reestablish that, and to some extent you'll have to live on a cash basis. Let me also say, Noble, on the previous question, from the position where I sit in terms of the procurement regulator for the country, we are developing a method by which small and very small moms and pops and companies and individuals could benefit from doing business with state enterprises through setting up small businesses that do not need a lot of capital. And we are in the process right now of registering those persons. So if you have a skill at, I mean, simple things like a weed whacker, or you do catering, you do decorating, or anything that of such that you could sell or benefit from state enterprises contracts. We are now registering those contractors, and we are registering them by regional corporations. So like Sawa, Laventille, if there are anything that needs to be done there, you could be in a position to benefit from preferential treatment. So that's an area, if anybody wants to get in contact with me, they could probably get in contact, and I could point them to how they could benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. We talked about passing your wealth on to your children and your children's children. How do we ensure that that wealth is safely passed on?
That's a very important question.
Make sure that you don't give it to them now. Put it on in terms of trusts and so on. So for example, if you want to put aside for their education and so on, make sure you set up a proper trust for it. Never ever put it in their hands at the early stage, because it will go as fast as it comes.
Lord, you going to say something?
Yes, well, on the same topic of making sure you have a properly written and organized will. I think Munilal has gone one step further, that you should have money transferred to a trust that will then be governed by the dictates of the will. You have to, a trust company such as a bank, may receive instructions via a trust as how money is to be used and when, and how it is to be paid out and so on. Many of us may not have the quantity of funds to really finance a trust. But that's a way of leaving some sort of management instructions as to what is done with your wealth.
Okay. How do we reduce our expenses as a country in terms of reducing the import of goods, and at the same time increase our exports? Are there any ideas on that, Kevin?
On the import side, first we have to understand that a lot of our imports are what we call autonomous, that we definitely need to import them. So items like fuel, some capital goods. So these are things that we have to import. Food, which is one of the biggest components of the import bill. Again, there are many things there that we do not grow locally. A lot of the breads and cereals, the grains and so forth. So it comes down to, if we look at food specifically, to really changing tastes. And this is something we have heard about for a long time, changing the taste of the population towards things that we can produce locally. But again, that is not a short-term endeavor. That is something that will take a lot of education, and it's something will only reap the benefits over the long term. But again, we've been seeing a lot of attention being placed on backyard gardening and so forth. So all of that is a start. So a little will go a long way. In terms of the exports, again, we are in a stage where we're still pretty much an energy-based economy. But in order for us to increase our non-energy exports, there will need to be some form of what we call structural transformation. Look at what the world needs. Where can we, as a country, Trinidad and Tobago, find a niche? Right, we are good with in terms of cultural exports, sporting tourism, medical tourism. These are areas that are somewhat underexplored, and they need to really devote some more resources to. So there are a lot of potential areas that we can invest into to increase our exports as a country, but they just need to be prioritized and some attention given to them.
Okay. And we have some people who are approaching retirement, and they therefore are asking, how do I prepare for this retirement if I am 5 years away from the actual date? Or they're asking, how do we make sure that our pension plans are going to be good enough for us, given the uncertainty of the current times? In 10 years' time, are we going to get less money? What's going to happen to us?
Allow me to venture a response. 5 years, 10 years before retirement, you need to be gearing down your debts. Many of us during our lifetime or working lifetime misuse the wonderful facility of the credit union. We first went into the credit union just waiting for 6 months to pass so that we could qualify for a member's loan. And we do a chronic series of borrowing, sometimes almost every year, topping up our loans as our shares increase. If you approach retirement with twice the amount of loans as you do have in shares, you are going to derail your retirement. You're going to take your retirement lump sum or gratuity, apply it to your excess of shares over loan, excess of loan over shares, and then you'll be cashing in your shares to clear off your loan. And you'll have damaged your retirement security just by that bit of recklessness. Mm-hmm. We need to appreciate the fact that our credit union shares pay sometimes 3 to 4 times more in dividend than any bank pays us on an average account, even our special accounts. If our retirement gratuity went into our credit union as a deposit toward shares, 6% as an annual return on that lump sum will enhance your pension. Very few people see it because they never took out their credit union shares as an investment. It was a vehicle for reaping loans. That's my major contribution.
Yeah, so you're saying don't look at your shares as a loan-making facility.
That's right.
But look at your shares as an investment.
Yes.
For your annuity. Okay.
Yep.
The other thing I would add to that, Noble, is that 5 years before retirement is a little bit late.
That's right.
For the young persons who are in this chat, start thinking about your retirement. It doesn't matter what age you are. If you are of working age, start thinking about your retirement now. It will benefit you in the long run.
What do you mean by start thinking about your pension now? Because
Yes.
I had some young 20-year-olds working with me and trying to get them onto the pension plan. And they said, no, why are you doing that now?
Absolutely. But what you need to do is to sit down and work some figures with them, which I just recently did. You would be amazed that they tend to be so much caught up with the day-to-day activities and for now, and then they don't realize they are getting old very quickly. And before they know it, they start to think about retirement, and then it's too late. So at 55, 60, and so on, it's a little bit too late. And then the amount you have to put aside to guarantee a reasonable living. The other thing is that the expenditure associated with medical and so on starts to climb after you retire. And that's where you have the less amount of income. So if you could get into things like a good medical plan to deal with your post-retirement medical issues and so on, those are things that you look at in addition to your pension.
Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
No, just saying on the pension note, we have to recognize, of course, pension income would never replace our salary income. And we're in a low interest rate environment now. So pension plans are being challenged by lower investment yields. So one of the suggestions would, of course, be to, if possible, try and supplement with another form of long-term savings. So don't rely solely on that pension plan from the company. You can, again, we're talking about annuities, take out the annuity or some other long-term investment that could supplement your pension income when that retirement time does come.
Okay. But Kevin, I have a question from a young person, and they're saying, okay, I'm a young person. You tell me put my money to doing annuity or some kind of pension plan, but I want to make a purchase of a car or a house. How do I balance that? And should I do it now, or should I wait till after the budget is read later on this year?
Well, that's the speculate. I mean, sometimes I think we sort of overemphasize a budgeter. A budget really is really an account of how you're going to earn your money and how you're going to spend it. We do so individually and we do so collectively as a country. Mm-hmm. So if it is, I mean, you're a young person, if it is a car is an absolute necessity at this time, it will help your convenience with yourself and your family. Then and you're able to do it within your income, then sure. I mean, I remember when I first started to work, that was one of my first priorities to get a vehicle, right? But at the same time, my company was offering a pension plan, and I was contributing to a pension plan at the side also. So again, it all depends on your priorities. At the end of the day, we all still have to live. So I would say that, you know, once your priorities are in proper perspective, then by all means.
I have a question from someone who has a small business, and they are asking the question, how do I balance, let me just read it again, how do I balance creating wealth and being sober in the work of God? What should be my mindset?
I have a simple answer to that in Matthew 6:33. Mm-hmm. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all other things shall be added unto you. When you put God first, and I've experienced it personally in my life, and over the years, I've learned to trust God more and more, especially getting into business, profession, jobs, and so on. When you seek him first and you follow and you obey him, he will add everything to you, and you will be amazed that how the guidance will come in different forms and fashion. He will bring people in your life to make sure that you are well taken care of. So I'll say put him first, and it will fall in place.
What do you mean by put him first?
You see, sometimes we tend to believe that in our own strength, but unless God gives us the strength to do what we are doing, unless he gives us the intellect and to think and the wisdom to make decisions and so on. And when we start to depend, sometimes we get so carried away that we believe that all this that we are accumulating is of our own doing, not recognizing it is part of God's plan. And if you live within his plan, seek his face and he will show you what his plans are. And once you are directed by him, things fall in place and you will be amazed where it comes from. Sometimes he brings people into your pathway that you don't know where they come from, but they are there and they were sent by God to make sure that your business prosper.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much, gentlemen. We are at the end of our session. We've gone over the time that we had budgeted, but I think it was a useful session. And so I will turn back over to our son, Tim, to wrap up and to close the meeting.
Okay, good day.
Oh, Lisa's going to close. All right. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, we just want to say a special thank you to all the presenters this evening.
Yeah.
Brother Finch, Brother Ince, and Brother Lalchan. We thank you for giving freely of your time. You know, it was a great investment of your time because you had to prepare and present. So we want to thank you in a special way. We want to thank Revelino Guevara. We want to thank you, Revelino, so about the technical aspects of this for us, and we want to thank you very, very much. We want to thank Brother Noble for coordinating this and for, what's the word again? Moderating this. We want to thank you in a special way. Okay, so I think we can pray now.
And thank the participants because we got up to over 90.
Sorry. Thank you, all of you, for participating. We thank you so much for joining us this evening. We want to pray that God will bless you and keep you. We want to tell you that the best way of showing your appreciation to these gentlemen is to process and implement some part of what we learned today. If it's one thing we learned, we could implement. If you haven't started doing your budget yet, that's something we could implement. If it is that you need to look at your expenses and see what you could cut out, that's something we could say thank you by doing. So I want to thank you, all of you, for being here. So,
and they will get copies of the PowerPoint as well.
Right.
Right. So we email it during the week.
Okay, so can we pray now? Yes. Okay, so Lord, we just want to thank you for this evening, oh God. We thank you for all you have done through this session, Lord. Lord, we pray a special blessing over the lives of the presenters, oh God. We pray that you're going to bless them, oh God. You're going to bless them. It's going to be pressed down, shaken together, and running over, Lord. Lord, we thank you for participants, oh God. We thank you, oh God, that we would now be able to make wise decisions, oh God. Help us, oh God, to examine ourselves and to see what you need to do, what we need to do, oh God. Lord, we thank you, oh God, that you have given us this opportunity, oh God, that we can come out in front, oh God. We can not just sit back and say, look what is happening here. We not just sit back and say, what has any political party done for us, oh God, but we can make decisions based on knowledge and wisdom, oh God. But we just want to thank you, oh God. I pray that you're going to bless everyone here this evening. Even as we leave each other's company, oh God, I thank you, and I thank you. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
I just want to say a shout out and back good afternoon to the National Director. So he's there, and our pastor, and all the pastors who are on this afternoon. At top of the afternoon to you all as well. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
I take the opportunity to thank you for inviting our participation and for the joy of contributing to the family of God. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're saying bye. You can put on the cameras if you want. So bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Ravelino.
Thanks very much,
Okay.
guys.
Okay.